What are the basic types of loyalty programs? Well, a lot of people think about loyalty and they think immediately about coupons or points or some kind of scoring system. You know, you go, you get a certain number of sandwiches, and then you get the next one for free. Well, that is one type of loyalty program, but I think it's important that we stratify the difference between loyalty programs that are appropriate for high value customers and loyalty programs that you might use for all customers. And a loyalty program for all customers is exactly that example of buy five, get another one free. Why? Because that is an increase in purchase frequency. That's what you want, is that extra boost after the first purchase. You want to retain them for the next one and maybe the next one. But that won't hold for long term. At the long term level, when we turn retention into loyalty, we want something that's more sophisticated. And in that case, we need to think about inspired premium programs, something that might have an emotional hook or a sense that it's only offered to you or it's only offered to a narrow group of high value customers. And that's a different type of loyalty program than your average just counting and tracking kind of loyalty program. Most companies don't separate. They basically have one type of loyalty program. In addition, there are two support systems behind the scenes that can also affect your loyalty program. In the all other customers camp, there is customer service. Well, that's essentially a loyalty program. If you've ever had bad customer service and it caused you to leave a company, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But on the other hand, you also have premium support or a special number you can call that's appropriate for your high value customers. So if you've ever had a premium credit card, maybe you've experienced this and there's a special number for you to call. So I want us to think about loyalty as more than retention, more than counting additional transactions as we go through this section about turning retention into loyalty. What is the difference between retention and loyalty? Now, we've talked about it in terms of the count of transactions, but I also want to share with you this very helpful chart that came, I think it's 2015, that came from David Edelman years ago when he was doing some early analysis about what caused people to buy. And in it, he outlined the decision journey. And it starts basically where somebody has a need and they consider all of the options. Let's say that I want to buy a new shirt and I have lots of different choices. I could go to many, many different brands in order to get a shirt. So now I need to know what kind of shirt. Is it a dress shirt? Is it men's? Is it women's? And I start narrowing down my choices in the consideration phase. As I move from consideration to evaluation, I might consider things like price. Is this one a better buy? Does this one have a coupon? Does this one have special features or design that I want? So I go through this big process of consider and evaluate as a customer, really as a consumer, before I become a customer. And then something magic happens and I buy. I get inspired by that particular brand or that particular item. At that point, there is the potential for the loyalty loop to kick in. As I experience the process of working with that brand, did I get my order on time? Was it packaged nicely? And I start to advocate and bond to the brand, I start to feel like I might have a reason to buy from that brand again. And this is why I separate retention and loyalty, because often that very first trip through the decision journey does not necessarily put you in the loyalty loop. So if it's a very expensive product, let's say it's a car, and you buy a luxury brand, and your experience post-purchase is like kid glove treatment. Every time you show up for service with your car, they give you expensive chocolates. Then maybe that is an example that for the first time through the journey, you end up in the loyalty loop. But for most products that are lower in dollar item, it can take multiple purchases. So that's why the step between the first purchase and the second and third purchase is so important in order to get somebody through into the loyalty loop. Now, when somebody gets into the loyalty loop, it essentially means that they are not considering other brands. They love your brand. They're married to that brand. And the only way to really kick them out of that loyalty loop is to give them a negative experience, really awful customer service, products don't hold up. There's a variety of reasons. But essentially, when people are in the loyalty loop, and the more people are in the loyalty loop, the more you can count on growth for your brand. And that is a very good thing. Well, what is the difference between customer loyalty and brand loyalty? Well, we've just talked about the loyalty loop and how people become advocates post-purchase. But in that operation, I've made a transaction happen. So loyalty is heavily related to unlocked future value. In other words, I've made a certain number of transactions that you can probably count on me coming back and generating more transactions for you. That's all mathematics. That is not the same as brand loyalty, which is how consumers perceive your brand. I don't have to have any purchases with your brand to feel really good about it. So for example, if I went to Disney World as a child and I had great memories, I have never spent 1 cent with Disney World, but I may have great brand affinity. And there can be a very nice interplay between brand loyalty and customer transactional loyalty. In fact, we oftentimes call it the grease in the wheels. Good brand loyalty will enhance overall customer transactional loyalty. What is the difference between customer loyalty and satisfaction? Well, this is another case where there is a very close relationship between loyalty, which as we've discussed is very transactional, and another metric, which is NPS score that commonly measures satisfaction. Now, yes, there are other ways to measure satisfaction, but I still find NPS which is Net Promoter Score, with all of its pros and cons, to be a very nice way of understanding if in that moment, at that particular point in time, did someone feel like they wanted to tell someone else about your brand? And that's a great thing, and it signals that someone has stepped into the loyalty loop. So the way Net Promoter Score works is you ask someone if they would refer your brand to someone else. Would they tell a friend about your brand and their experience that they made this purchase? When the score comes back from 0 to 6, that's essentially a negative or a detractor. On the other hand, when you get a 9 or a 10, that's a positive, that's a promoter. And you want to subtract the difference between the detractors and the promoters to get your NPS score. The people in the middle who are at 7 and 8 are considered passive, and they are not counted in the calculation. Now, you could possibly match NPS score to customer lifetime value, and that would give you a very interesting metric, because you might assume that your promoters are naturally your high value customers. But what if your promoters were your detractors? That would give you an early signal that something is wrong that needs to be addressed immediately, because it will affect the future growth of the company. How should we measure customer loyalty? Well, growth in customer lifetime value is a great way to measure customer loyalty, as well as NPS score, which we've discussed. But you can also use leading engagement metrics. Let me give you an example with Electronic Arts to show you how they interlock these metrics to create 4 very powerful, trendable metrics that help them understand their business. The first metric is scale. What is the share of customers that we have overall compared to what we could have? The second metric is time. For Electronic Arts, they discovered that when a player is spending a lot of time in one game, they are much more likely to come in and purchase the next game. So watching and trending the amount of engagement within the game, within the product for them, was a critical metric for understanding their future performance. Now, not everyone can trend how often did the person wear that shirt? How often did they eat at a particular restaurant? It may not be possible for you to always trend that kind of engagement, but I encourage you to think about reading engagement metrics. Fortunately, in a digital product, you can measure something like time. You can also measure things like average spend. And that is just basically looking at the most profitable and the most loyal customers. And finally, loyalty, which was measured through customer satisfaction and NPS score, is the final metric that they trended over time. Now, these four metrics gave them a very clear picture across brands, across products, of what they needed to do and when they might be edging slightly lower than they wanted, or when a brand was really succeeding. And with that information, they could go backward into, should we be spending more in marketing? Should we be spending less? It would really help them define a number of actions, from product to marketing to other internal actions that help them develop and grow over time. Should you use discounting to improve loyalty? And the answer there is the typical, it depends. But let me give you a little bit of a quadrant to think through it. I posted a story about should you discount during COVID, but it applies whether we're in COVID or not. And it has to do with thinking about the organization's data maturity and the consumer demand. If you have low consumer demand and low data maturity, then discounting with dignity in order to attract people with best pricing, trade up policies. I can bring an item back if I didn't like it, and you will exchange it for something more valuable, or you'll credit me. Like jewelry operates this way sometimes. You can upgrade your diamond ring if you buy from certain brands, and that allows you to feel more comfortable with that initial purchase. So the quadrant one is low consumer demand and low loyalty. Quadrant two is app-driven loyalty programs with bulk or bundle pricing sometimes behind them. And this is where the Starbucks app started when it first rolled out. The company had high consumer demand. Coffee is an everyday product. And then we'll talk about how they moved over to quadrant four in just a second. If I have high data maturity, but low consumer demand, then I can think about CLV segmentation and narrow, targeted, more personalized discounts to encourage somebody to perhaps buy now or buy now in advance and use later. That was a technique that was used during COVID from a lot of people in the hotel industry, which does have generally high data maturity, where they wanted you to buy points or buy credits in advance or hold your ticket and use it in the future. Related to that is high data maturity and high consumer demand. And this is the path that Starbucks took when it moved from just a regular loyalty program to something that was time-bound, value-driven, personal discounts with gamification thrown in. And we'll talk a little bit more about Starbucks as a case study. But overall, this is probably the highest and best use of discounting, is what I would call hyper discounting, understanding exactly who you should be discounting to at exactly the right time with respect to the right product to throw into the mix. That is a very difficult task, and it is one that is definitely worthy and important as companies grow in their overall customer-centric data maturity. What is a good example of a customer loyalty program? Well, I'm going to build on our Starbucks example that we talked about in the retention section to illustrate how we move from retention to loyalty. Loyalty is often driven by trust, surprise and delight, things that meet and beat our expectations. With the Starbucks app, we have user-friendly design. That means it works as expected, and you don't have to click 40 times or force it to order a cup of coffee. This is a very nice friction-free commerce. But there's a delight component that comes in here where they also include music, which has been a classic integration with Starbucks for many years, as well as geolocation mapping. Where is my nearest store? And special member events or a birthday reward or a way to do gifting. There are lots of different ways that they are adding features without overwhelming the user and staying gently within that surprise and delight area. Now, they've also created a very engaging loyalty program with a lot of gamification. There are challenges, and those challenges are often related to certain products or experiences that they want you to have to become closer to the brand. That is an emotional pull that drives brand loyalty. So even just when they issue a challenge, they talk about it as how to play. Well, who doesn't like to play? They also give us special offers and the ability to earn stars. Everything is about stars, and this is very much like a hotel program. You have a basic level of stars, and then you have a higher level of stars, and you might lose them over time if you don't use them. We also have mobile pay and ordering, which is a big element, not just for convenience and saving time, but in the COVID era, it became increasingly important. And then last, there is a heavy integration component with other platforms and services. We've seen Lyft rewards come through. We've seen Spotify, which plays naturally to the music component. And there's even an integration with the Chase credit card. So lots of different ways that Starbucks is firing on multiple pillars in order to create an emotional pull that draws you back again and again and encourages you not just to come back, but to be emotionally attached and think of the brand as a friend, as something that's there for you all the time. So this is a very strong example of a company that has moved from transactional retention into true emotional loyalty with a lot of happiness, surprise, delight, and generally very good convenience. So should you be discounting to increase loyalty? Well, that is a very good question. But if you need help understanding your data maturity or getting more value out of your customer analytics and understanding who is in your customer base, then give us a call. We'd be happy to chat more.